Everybody, we're going to call to order. It's 1 o'clock. Welcome. Jackets on, seats taken. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the Fpdr board meeting of September 25th. We start with the approval of the minutes, the administrative part of our day. Minutes were distributed earlier. Does anyone have any corrections or comments to the minutes?
I do not.
No. Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
So minutes are approved. We also start off every meeting with the opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves. So I will have the trustees we will introduce ourselves by name, and then we will start around the room from our left all the way around.
Jason Lehman.
Catherine McLeod.
Jennifer Cooperman.
Elizabeth Fouts.
Outside legal counsel for the fund. Nelson Hall, Department Counsel for Portland Fire and Fpdr.
Alan Frischwaller, President of Firefighter Association.
Mike Myers, Fire Chief of the City of Portland.
Greg Morgan, I'm the president of the PDCOA, the Police Lieutenants.
Frank Del Carlo, I'm the liaison from the Fire Bureau to Fpdr.
Crystal Butula, Police Liaison.
Gerald Lamberti, retired Portland Police Officer.
Al Frioff, President of Portland, retired Portland Police and Widows Association.
Olivia Watman, attorney at Public Safety Labor Group.
Kimberly Mitchell, Fpdr.
Franco Lucci, City Attorney's Office.
Sherry Miller, Fpdr.
Julie Barber, Fpdr.
Stacey Jones, Fpdr. And Tony Sacco, Fpdr.
Sam Hutchison, Bureau Director, Fpdr.
Great. Welcome, everybody. We're very glad to have you all. More people than we usually get, so happy to have you. Is there anyone who signed up for public comment? So thank you. Nobody signed up for public comment. We will move into the action items, and we have one action item on our agenda, resolution number 523, administrative rule amendment, and I will let our director walk us through that.
Okay, this is just some real minor housekeeping that we needed to get corrected. So there's 3 sections to this resolution. So we're just talking about Rule 5712, which is how to offset service-connected and occupational disability benefits. We're specifically talking about recovering an overpayment. We said we recover an overpayment from future overpayment payments or something. So we had to cross out over. We had used one too many overpayments instead of payments there. So we just did a strikeout of 4 letters. On that one, 5714, recovery of overpayments. We're doing some, there's a section B, which is interim disability overpayment recovery. We sort of slipped and put it as a C instead of a 4. Again, you can just see it here. We're just trying to correct a minor location of where some of the wording should be, because that line that was C actually applies to interim disability specifically. So we needed to slide that under there. Then 5309, public records request. This brings us up to speed to where everybody who's requesting public records from the City of Portland, including Fpdr, now need to go through the city's public records request system. The old one said they had to write me. Now they don't write me. They go into the city's public records request website and request it through there, specifically stating it's for Fpdr records. So just trying to get that to match the modern terms. So that's all we have on that.
Does anyone have any questions?
No. No.
So no questions. Would somebody make a motion that we can adopt the amendments as proposed?
I'll make a motion we adopt the proposed rule amendments.
And I'll second that.
Great. Let's take a vote. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Motion's passed. So your amendments to the administrative rule have passed. Thank you for keeping us aligned with the alphabet, et cetera. Okay. And now we move into some informational items on the agenda.
Okay, one thing as we go through the informational items, just so everybody hears, that we had one of the last informational items, if I can find my agenda real quick, was the legal update. We said executive session. We're going to hold that in open session unless somebody asks a really specific question that would require the answer to go into executive session. So we're going to make that to public session for number 5. Okay, so the number 1 is the state of FPDR here. So my team will come up and help. We'll do this as a team presentation.
Pull up it on the chair.
How seriously should I take this reserve?
It's reserved for you, Stacy. Okay, we're here to present you the annual state of FPDR for the fiscal year 2017 through June 2018. So the goal of the presentation is to provide you, as well as the people in the audience in the room here, an overview of what's happened in FPDR and with the fund for the last fiscal year. We're going to show you how various activities and actions have impacted the fund and some things that may impact the fund in the future. So presenting with me is Kim Mitchell, Claims Manager. Right there, and then next to her, Stacy Jones, Financial Manager, and then at the end of the table, Sherry Miller, our Senior Business Systems Analyst. So as we go through this presentation, I urge you to ask questions as we discuss topics. We can best answer them as we are going through them right now. Okay, so as we kick off here, we'll talk over some of the big things that happened last year. PFFA renegotiated their contract and it went back, so we had to, back in time, was it 2016? And so we had to pay some retro adjustments to, for FPDR2 people that had retired. For FPDR1, their COLA matches the union payout or the union raises, so they've got 2.5 years worth of raises, so we had to calculate the overpayments or the adjustments. So we issued over $284,000 in adjustments to all those people, to 454 people with that. So we did that pretty effectively and quickly. It's something that, it's rare that we have to get that far of a look back with a contract negotiation. So that's what took some time to go through and had to recalculate quite a few pensions, as you can see. We also had a turnover in the board last year. Elizabeth replaced Justin Delaney. Justin had been here for, 11 some odd years, so big shoes to fill for Elizabeth, and I appreciate that. Thank you. We extended our board contract with our external counsel, Lauren, who introduced himself earlier. Lauren provides outside legal advice to the fund and to the Board of Trustees and to FPDR. He has an extensive background in public pension systems and actuarial and other financial stuff, so if we need to get that kind of information, he's the one that we turn to from the legal advice. Something that we always have is subrogation, is to where we go after third parties that we think caused the person's disability. So for over this last year, we collected over $330,000, all due to the gas explosion and the injuries there. So it was quite a bit of work by our benefits analyst to do that. And she was able in a couple of cases to negotiate, get a full 100% recovery of our lien, which includes past benefits and estimation of future benefits. So there's a lot of great work. We usually don't see subrogation get much above $30,000 to $40,000 a year. So this was a big effort for her and a good recovery. So what's happening this year? So we're in the process of doing some stuff, and right now the city and FPDR are going through a major change in the website, trying to take it, I don't know if you've gone into the city's website, it's pretty old and archaic in its model. They're trying to change its total format to where it's completely user-focused. So by the time it is done, it will look radically different. FPDR, we already started some of that work, so we're piggybacking into that, trying to make our website more accessible and more intuitive to use for our members so they can gather information quickly and easily and probably do some additional work on the site that they haven't been able to do. So we are expecting a target date next spring, so I think we'll share with the board whether we get some beta looks at our website. We'll share them with you and let you take a look at what it's doing. We're also doing security upgrades. I think we've advised you this in the past. We're finally going to make our office more secure, change some of the locks on the doors, automate some of the doors. We have cameras, security cameras in there. They are now hooked up to the city's security desk, which before they were not. And we also have a panic button that will also activate the city's security desk. And so we'll have a better relationship with city security should we need stuff. And maybe it doesn't rise to 911 type of call, but at least we can get some more security and help. And they've done some other assessments of security in the office. Phase 2 of the pension estimate automation process. Last year we had shared a lot of information on pension estimates during the state of Fpdr. We do about 400 pension estimates a year. It's an average of 5 hours per estimate, so 2,000 hours dedicated to that. Our goal is when we're done with all 3 stages of this automation process is to cut that time in half. So it's a big advantage for us to do. So we're just working our way. We've completed step 1, and now we're going to go for step 2 and 3 on the new system. And interestingly, we have the post-retirement medical benefit is how they used to have to apply for that benefit. So it's a retiree who has a medical condition that's tied back to a claim that we had previously approved. They can still get the medical for that claim. They used to have to file a whole new claim like they were filing for a whole new disability claim, and that's not right. It didn't make sense. So right now we've changed the packet so it's specifically saying, I want this benefit, and they don't have to go through all the hoops and hurdles as if it was a brand new claim. And then we're also looking at all our injured worker packets to enhance and improve the quality. This goes sort of along the line. We want to make them more understandable, easier to use for people, and I think down the road in the future we may be looking to try to see if we can automate the completion of some of those forms for them.
Just quickly back to the automation project for pension estimates. When do you anticipate phase 3, I guess the final phase, to be completed? Just
we're looking at the table or system.
Is this 2018? Is it 2019? Is it 2020?
It would be 2019.
19?
Yeah,
Ish.
my hope is early.
Okay. Great. So that would mean that a member can just go on and input data, and the system will? No, you're squinching when I say that.
No, the pension estimator analyst will be able to do that, though.
Okay.
So we do have an online, we have it right now, that you can go on and get an estimate for. It's not as accurate as we would wish it to be. And we'll look at that and at redesigning that as part of this project, but I think for a really good estimate, we're still gonna have to have our financial analysts touch it. There are hundreds of different ways to pay police and fire, and what I've discovered over the years is that they are amazing at what they do, but they're not great at telling us or knowing themselves how they're paid, because their pay varies, I think, every 2 weeks. So to count on them to say, well, I'm a paramedic and I'm an apparatus operator and I got 3% longevity, if they tell us their name, we can tell them all that and give them a really accurate estimate. And we usually get those out in about a week. I think we get out over 80% of them within a week. So it's a real quick turnaround for a member too. They're not waiting. But we are spending a lot of man hours on it. It's far too manual of a process, and we think we can automate at least half of that process. So,
thanks.
And this is one of our big customer service offers for our members. We want them to be ready for retirement, so we do encourage them to get estimates for their pension. And some people get estimates 5 or 6 years ahead of time, just so they can understand the ballpark of what they think their estimate's for.
And I would dare say you're already doing equal or better than PERS when they come out with their estimates. So. Yeah.
We are much more better than PERS.
Room for improvement, appreciate that.
Yes, room for improvement, and in terms of speed of our
accuracy.
analysts, yes, and hours. But yeah, I think at PERS you have to pay for estimates more if you get more than 2 a year, and they usually take a couple of months to get them out, and you can only have one date. And our members often ask for scenarios, which I think help them make decisions about promotions and assignments. They'll say, well, what would it be if I became a lieutenant? I met a guy at a workshop who was all the way up to police commander and said that he moved all the way up from sergeant based on his pension estimates over the year. Like, oh, it's so much better if I become lieutenant, and now captain, and now commander. we do a lot of
Speaking of, you mentioned the word workshop, and when you're talking about the number that you do per year, are there workshops anticipated for this coming year and expected to increase that number over usual?
Yes. So we've already we used to offer 3 workshops a year, and now we're offering 4. And we typically have 30 to 50 folks in those now. We used to have to, even of the 3, we used to cancel them probably 25% of the time because we'd have only 5 or 6 folks sign up. And it was just quicker to go through those individually with the person than to have a workshop. So now we have 4 a year. They're always full. The one that we have in October is at 50 members right now. So yeah.
Do you videotape?
And we videotape, and the presentations are online on our website. And I know at the Fire Bureau, and a special shout out to Frank Del Carlo, who arranges for the fire folks to professionally videotape those, so they look good too.
Yes, thank you.
And part of the attendance goes up because we are encouraging attendance with it. I mean, it's our liaisons who introduced themselves earlier go off and out recruit people. Hey, you're thinking of retiring in a few years, you need to go to the workshop. So we're trying to encourage people to attend, and the liaisons are doing a great job of encouraging people in their bureaus to attend. So we are more excited that we have 50 than we were when we only had 4 or 5.
Sure, thank you.
Then after we've talked about what's been happening, we'll flip over to some of our key performance measures. So the following few slides show performance areas that impact the fund and thus, I think should be of interest to you, other Fpdr stakeholders and the taxpayers as we go through. The first one here is the percent of workforce on disability. You can see the dotted trend line shows that it's getting fewer on disability at a given time, which actually, if you take a look at it, it's leveled out somewhere between the area of around 3.3, 3.5%. And we expect it to stay level at about that. We're not looking for it to go down. The interesting thing is why this was originally put as a performance measure. If we had blown this out to the last 15 years of data, you would have seen 15 years ago that we had 7 to 9% of the workforce on disability at a given time. So there's been a significant change over the time, and that's due to quite a few things. One is in 2007, they had a charter change or a charter reform as to where the movement of the management and the decision-making on the claims were taken from the board and moved into Fpdr. So technically, I'm the final decision maker on the claims versus the board. The expectation is that Fpdr would be using best standards of workers' compensation claim management, which we definitely do. So we've had improved claim investigation, claim management with it moving in-house completely. We have transitional duty, which is where we reimburse, and we'll talk a little bit more on this later, where we encourage bureaus to take people back at a sort of a limited duty. They can pay the full salary. We will reimburse them 75% of the salary. So we are getting encouragement of people returning to work. Kim will go over that in a little bit more. And we also find that, I don't know if the work ethic has changed, but we definitely know the work ethic for both police officers and firefighters is we'd rather be working than staying at home. So with things like transitional duty and then making sure they're getting the right kind of medical care, we're giving them the opportunity to return to work, doing what they like, being a police officer or a firefighter. The next chart, which would be chart number 5, this is just a comparison. The bars are showing the amount of retirements we have from Fpdr2 or Fpdr2 people retiring, and then we've overlaid it with the percent of workforce that is now Fpdr3. So as Fpdr2 people retire, they're replaced with Fpdr3. So you can definitely see over time that this number is going up. Or approximately 40% of active duty firefighters and police officers are now Fpdr3, which means they're in the PERS system versus Fpdr2. And if this goes, we expect the retirements to continue at that higher, maybe a little bit higher, and definitely we'll see the Fpdr3 member percentages increasing over time. And this will be reflected in some of the financial charts, why this is important to understand that. And then the last slide that I'll look at before Stacy takes over the last couple of them is the tax levy. This is always one of the most important things that the Bureau has to do is monitor the tax levy. You'll see a line up near the top that's at $2.80 per 1,000 in real market value. This is the maximum that Fpdr can levy to do the fund, so we're always trying to get estimates and seeing, are we going to be able to levy enough money to pay our retirees as well as make the PERS contribution, as well as pay our disabled people. So I'll break this chart down here a little bit. You'll see on the left-hand side a little break of about 4 or 5 years. That's historically what it has been. You can see the number drop from 162 down to 113. That's heavily to do with the improvement of the economy. Property values have gone up significantly, which means we don't have to levy as much per 1,000 because there's just a larger pool to make a levy against. The next 4 or 5 years we're at $1.11, but the next 4 or 5 years is based on a lot of updated data, and it's coming out of like with the city, what am I trying to think of? City
economists?
City economists, there we go, thank you. City economist data with this. So this is fairly accurate. We don't expect a whole lot of variation for the next 4 or 5 years. But then after that, you're going to see 2 lines here. This is the Millman study where they do the levy adequacy. They will be presenting they update it every 2 years. You will get the updated version in January. So they'll probably update this part of the chart for you. And so they present 2 lines on here. The top line is what you would call the 5th percentile. That means it's darn close to your worst case scenarios. There are some that are pretty crazy out there, but this tends to be where you would say your worst case scenarios are based on today's assumptions with it. And the good news is we're 45 cents below our high of 280. So that's a good thing to do. Now, again, we'll see if the assumptions change or the economy's changed enough that this line may change, but we'll find out in January. I'm not expecting a significant change. Things that would change this in the future are going to be another financial collapse, a loss of property values, something odd for some reason the voters voted to significantly change or increase retirement benefits. And then there's a few things like if you have the big earthquake, you're going to have a lot of people who can't pay their stuff, plus a lot of properties damaged, and you could see property values drop significantly, especially if people don't make an effort to restore their property. But those are some of the really far out ones. We're looking at this. The one that tends to be flat is the 50th percentile. That's sort of, that's sort of the one, if things continue the way they are, we'll think that's where it will stay. But again, it could be in between these 2 lines, or it could be below. We don't show you the 95th percentile because that would be nice to look at, but to you and to me as fiduciaries of this plan, it's a meaningless number. We care about, do we have enough funds to pay, enough tax revenue to pay the benefits and the funds that we have to have. So that's why you're going to see the worst case scenario as well as probably the average scenario on this one. So we're looking good here. We'll get an update from Millman in January. I'm not expecting a huge change in it, but I have to knock on wood because we're just now in the process of providing that information and working with Millman on that. Okay.
All right, I'll talk about the next few slides. So the next performance measure in front of you on slide 7, this is our traditional way of sort of benchmarking administrative costs. We've talked about this before. It's administrative costs as a % of our total budget. Administrative costs are personnel and office supplies and office space and IT and all those things. And our operating budget is almost every dollar we send out the door, which is mostly benefit expenses. It doesn't include fund contingency and fund transfers and things like that. You can see that it's been relatively steady for the last 4 years, hovering in that 1.5% zone, which is really good when you compare it across the industry, but we'll talk about that here in a moment. There was a spike in 13-14 where you see that 2.2%. That's the year we settled the tax offset overpayment lawsuit, which I know is before most of your time. You can talk to me about it afterward, or now if you want, but Trustee Lyman will remember it. And some of those settlement costs were classified as administrative expenses, so that's the spike. The 5 years that are kind of off the graph that you can't see before that, our admin expenses are in the 1.75 to 1.9% range. So we have come down from there. But as the board discussed when we talked about this measure last time, I believe it was Trustee McLeod and Trustee Lyman who were raising this issue, maybe it was all of you, is this really the best measure of administrative efficiency? Because our operating costs are going up and up and up as we fund 2 generations of pensions at once, which means the denominator in this equation is growing, and as long as the numerator doesn't grow faster than that, that this percentage is going to keep falling, or perhaps, stay static if we were also increasing administrative expenses. So I wanted to take a look at a different measure, and if you flip to the next slide, on slide 8, you'll see the purple bar is administrative cost per plan participant, which is another measure commonly used in the pension plan world. And if you look at the last 4 years, you can see that we're spending about $600 per plan participant. Now, participant is everybody. So it's everybody we send a check out to right now. So that's retirees, surviving spouses, alternate payees, folks on disability, and everybody who's an active member of the Bureau and is covered by the pension plan and the disability plan. So this is a different measure. I think it's one that's a little easier for people to get their arms around because you can really say, all right, everybody out there, it's costing us $600 to provide them with a pension and disability plan. But more importantly, for our purposes, it should be a more stable measure because the size of our participant pool is not changing in any significant way, whereas our costs are going to keep going up. And that's just because of the timing of when we're funding people's plans. The size of the pool is the same, but we're pre-funding some and direct paying some. So costs will go up in the short run, but the size of the pool should stay the same. So hopefully this measure will be a little more stable if the board wants to look at this measure going forward. It does tell a similar story that costs have, not changed a lot in the last 4 fiscal years. If I were on the board, I'd also like to know, how much administrative spending is going up and how that compares to inflation. In fiscal year 17-18, administrative spending grew 2.02%, and the year before that it grew 1.24%. And the year before that it actually declined 2.62%. So we can also say that administrative costs are not growing as quickly as general inflation. That doesn't address whether they were in the right place to start out with, but it does tell you how quickly they're growing. To give you a little bit of information about that. It is incredibly hard to benchmark this across the industry because most plans don't, they say they collect this data, but they don't publish it. The cost per plan participant seems to exist mostly on the DC, on the defined contribution, third-party administrator side where they're marketing, what their costs are per plan participant. And then there are very few plans like ours where we are both a pension plan and a workers' compensation replacement plan, and more than half of our expenses are disability related. So it's real hard to benchmark. But I hope that this gives the board at least another way to look at administrative costs.
Yeah. Thank you.
Questions? Okay.
Thanks.
Continue it.
All right. So now I also manage the pension program, so we're going to flip to talking about the pension program for just a few slides. So this first slide shows you the number of people who are receiving a pension benefit at any point in the fiscal year for the last 5 fiscal years. So again, this is retirees, surviving spouses, and alternate payees. And it's broken out in the purple by Fpdr 2 members, and the sort of beige is the Fpdr 3 members. So the first thing that you can see is that the pension population has grown slowly but steadily over the last 5 years, and there is only one way that happens in a pension plan. More people retire than die, and that is exactly what's been happening. We've had a lot of retirements over the last several fiscal years, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. We've had over 150 retirements in the last 3 years. And we've had longevity increases. People are just living longer. We looked at kind of a 10-year rolling median of age at retiree death. And when we did that in 2017, the median age of a retiree at death was 84.5. And when we looked at that in 2008, again looking at the median of the prior 10 years, it was 78.1. So that is a 6-year increase in age of retiree at death. We didn't look at surviving spouses, but I wouldn't be surprised to see something kind of similar going on with surviving spouses. We have seen bigger longevity increases in the male population, and our members tend to be male. But 6 years is a lot in a decade, and so we're seeing big longevity increases. which is, of course, a positive thing for the folks who are living longer, but it does increase our costs. The other thing you can see on this slide is that, as you would expect, the FPDR2 beneficiaries are a growing percent of our pensioners. That's because they are still retiring. They're 60% of the active workforce, and there's not much mortality in that group. The average age of an FPDR2 retiree is 66.5. And then in contrast, the FPDR1 group in the beige is shrinking. We only have 3 FPDR1s who are not yet retired, but they're all on long-term disability, so there's not a lot of inflow into this pool. But mortality is a big factor in this group. The average age of an FPDR1 retiree is 85 and a half. Like at the start of this fiscal year, last fiscal year, on July 1, 2017, there were 463 FPDR1 beneficiaries, and at the end, on June 30, 2018, there were 418. So that's about a 10% mortality loss in that pool, to give you kind of a sense. So you can see on this slide, though, why our direct pension costs are going up. We have more and more retirees, and a larger percentage of them are FPDR2 members who have a more generous pension benefit. On the next slide, on slide 10, this looks specifically at retirements, which I alluded to just a moment ago. Part of the reason that the retiree population is growing is because a lot of people are retiring. So the purple line shows service retirements, total service retirements for each fiscal year for the last 5 years. And then underneath that in the bar graph, it breaks that out by fire in red and police in blue. So in each of the last 3 fiscal years, we've had more than 50 retirements. Now, it's not that anomalous to have more than 50 retirements in a year. If you look back over 10 years, you'll see half the time we have more than 50. What is totally anomalous is to have that happen 3 years in a row. So many years of sustained retirements, that is something really unusual. And thinking back to the last time we talked about this, Trustee McLeod asked, well, what percent of the sworn workforce is retiring? Great question. I have the answer for you now. In fiscal year 17-18, about 3.3% of the total sworn workforce retired, and in 16-17, it was 3.7%. But what is super interesting is to look at the difference between the bureaus in that. Last year in 17-18, at fire, 1.7% of the sworn workforce retired, but at police, it was 4.6% of their workforce retired. Similar pattern in 16-17. But not quite as pronounced. 2.8% of the fire workforce retired in 16-17 and 4.5% retired at the police bureau. So there's quite a difference. And police is turning over their workforce a lot faster than fire is.
That is really helpful. Thanks for remembering, including that information, because I am
remember
interested
everything
in it.
you guys say.
Can you remind me, though, because I don't remember, what's the overall population of fire and police, roughly percentages? A
Yes.
third, 2/3? What's
So police is 57% of the sworn workforce, and I was just about to talk about this, actually.
Okay.
And fire is 43%
Thank you.
of the sworn workforce. So now if we turn and look at retirements, we can see that police is, as you would expect from what I just said, overrepresented in retirements. So if police is 57% of the sworn workforce over this 5-year period we're looking at, they make up 65% of the retirements. And if you just look at the last 2 years, they make up 72% of retirements.
And if we were to look at the 5 years to the left, not on this page, are these patterns sustained?
In terms of the split between the bureaus, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. In terms of the level of retirements, total, it's much spikier. We get a year with a lot, a year with not so many, a year with a medium amount. But these last 3 years just sustained at this very high level, and mostly police. But I could look at the last 5 years and look at the split and let you guys know what it looks like before that. Because 5 years is, it's hard to compare to what it looks like historically, traditionally.
Do you think that some of this sustained increase level is because of the 27 pay periods and or waiting for, the resolution for the bargaining agreement, those things?
That is our speculation. So what I was going to say last on this slide is that it looks like our fire retirement bubble is still there. And we have sort of attributed that to their contract not being settled. And now that the contract is settled, and that takes out one piece of uncertainty for folks trying to decide whether to retire, And the next 27 pay date month is February 2019. So we were expecting to see a lot of fire retirements. But I will tell you, just went over this with my staff this morning, that of the 50 people we have signed up for our October retirement workshop, 43 of them are police. and that on the day-to-day pension estimates we're seeing, we didn't count, but my staff feels strongly that it's in the 2/3 to 3/4 range police. So the fire folks also tend to ask for estimates further in advance than the police and plan more for that. So it may be that we are still going to see a lot of fire retirements in February, but we're not seeing a lot of requests for fire estimates or to come to the workshops. So, yeah. So the police are, retiring and in very high numbers, and fire folks are not.
Thank you.
Questions or thoughts? The next slide is a look at the sworn, at the active duty workforce. So these are the folks who are working. Again, we have it broken out by FPDR 3 in purple and FPDR 2 in beige. And again, the one thing to note is that over the last 3 years, the size of the sworn workforce has been growing, very slowly, but growing. Police has been hiring at a record clip. Before I came to Fpdr, I was the police budget analyst, so I've looked at police hiring for a long time. I've never seen them hire as quickly as they are hiring right now and in these numbers. But they are struggling to dig out of the vacancy hole and then to dig out of the retirement hole that we just saw, let alone start filling the 50 or so new positions they got in the last budget cycle. But if they did manage to sustain this level of hiring and keep it up and retirement stabilized, we would see the size of the sworn workforce spike up. And our FPDR 3 PERS contribution costs would spike as well, because of course, all those new hires will be FPDR 3 folks. As you would expect, more and more of the workforce is FPDR 3. As Sam mentioned, we're up to 40% now, up from 25% 5 years ago. So you can see that's one of the reasons our PERS contribution expenses are going up. There are just more and more of those folks, and that we're building up to that moment of peak expense in the early 2030s when that whole bar is purple and our FPDR 2 retiree population is still relatively young. This last slide about the pension program, slide 12, talks about dollars, number of dollars instead of number of people. These are all of our pension costs by fiscal year for the last 5 fiscal years. In purple are the PERS contribution expenses for the FPDR 3 members, and in beige are the direct pension benefits we're sending out the door every month to our FPDR 1 and 2 beneficiaries. So again, it shows you how we're building up to that peak moment in dollar terms, because both our direct pension benefits are going up and our PERS contribution expenses are going up. And on average, over the last 5 fiscal years, our pension expenses have gone up about 5% is our average annual growth rate over the last 5 years, and it's about double inflation. But the main driver of that is that we are funding 2 generations of pensions simultaneously, which will reduce costs in the long run a generation from now. So that is the main driver. There are other drivers. All 3 sworn bargaining units have had wage increases above and beyond inflation. So that is a factor, because that increases most pension benefits, and it also increases disability benefits. The return of the 27 pay date calculation has increased benefits. As we saw, the sworn population has been growing a little bit. As we've talked about, folks are living longer. And then also PERS contribution rates continue to go up every other year. So all of those are other smaller factors that are playing into our increasing pension costs, but the dominating factor is funding 2 generations of pensions simultaneously. Are there any questions about pension before we talk about disability?
Okay, so the next section is disability program. I'll do the first half of this, which we're going to be focusing in on the wellness program, because we had some questions last time, and then Kim will dive down deeper into the disability program with that. So I just want to go over the wellness programs, what they're like, and then eventually we'll get to the impact that they have or have not on FPDNR. So wellness and programs overall throughout the country were initially created by and for employers. Their goal was to reduce their employment costs in both reduced medical premiums as well as reduce absenteeism. This stuff was, it's a pressure on all the benefits they're offering as their medical premiums continue to climb faster than everything else. They're trying to find ways to bring that down so they can have more benefit dollars available for other benefits for the employees. Then after they got into doing these programs, they found that, well, gee, if they got a healthy workforce, the idea is we can get more productivity out of people. The concept is presenteeism. People are in the office, but they're sick and not working well, so they're not getting 100% out of them while they're there. Then they also started finding out, well, the millennials are excited to work for employers that care about them and ones that they can establish a relationship with, and employers that hold the same values they do, significant different from the baby boomer generation. So they begin to find that as they offered wellness programs, they could increase employee engagement and satisfaction and boost some of the loyalty and attract the best talent. That was why they did it. The challenge with is, so the wellness programs have been out for probably in various forms for maybe even up to 20 years. But how can you figure out, are the wellness programs really delivering on the promises and the expectations I just went over? As you look through the website and you look through a lot of materials, there's a tremendous amount of hype about wellness programs. A lot of people are publishing information. There are people that either provide wellness programs or really invested in making sure they work, so you try to get through the hype that they put through on their information. So I search for what I call academic studies. They're done by organizations that have no skin in the game for whatever the results are. They want to come out and their question is, do these programs work as expected? And I've got some citations for them if you want, and I can share them with you. So what these studies found is the wellness programs have little effect on employer costs in the first few years, and it's more of a long-term savings game. It makes sense because if you are an employee is now starting to lose weight, starting to eat better, maybe stop smoking, where you get the payback is that they don't develop diabetes in 5 or 10 years. They don't have that heart attack in the future 5 to 10 years. Most of these programs don't give instantaneous improvement to health and therefore instantaneous improvement to medical premiums. So it makes sense that you're in for the long game when you do a wellness program. They did find that wellness programs increased healthy behaviors in employees. Exercise, smoking cessation, and weight control were the top 3 and the most popular by the people in wellness programs. Again, they also saw that younger workers were excited to work for employers that had good wellness programs. Again, it comes back to the millennial viewpoint of being able to work for an employer that shares the same values that they do. They found there's no indication in either of these studies that there was no indication of a correlation between wellness programs and workers' compensation claim incidents. So there was they couldn't find any connection for that. And interestingly enough, that really wasn't many of the employers' goal wasn't to specifically target workers' compensation. It was more toward controlling their medical premium. That's why they did it. There was sort of a side thing they found too, is the healthier employees were most likely to avail themselves of a wellness program than unhealthy employees.
Could I ask you something?
Yes.
Are you citing a specific study or what?
I have two studies that these are summaries. The slide is.
Is that in here somewhere?
I don't have it in there. I can email those studies to you. So
yeah, I'd be curious to see.
What they have.
And just on the last point there, I see what you're saying, and I've heard similar things in my reading. I'd be curious whether, if you follow up with this sort of study in the future, curious whether, while the incidence of claims might not change very much, if the severity of claims changes and the trail.
It could be, but I mean that again, the studies just didn't find it because it may be that the studies themselves weren't specifically looking at workers' comp because again, what most of the employers were looking for was reduced medical premiums and improve absentee rates or reduced absentee rates because that's why these programs were developed.
So Sam, in the studies, what did they consider long-term expectations or long-term reduction in cost?
They really didn't say. They're just saying programs that, I think they targeted programs that were just younger than 5 years weren't seeing the paybacks that people thought, but they said longer term. I didn't recall them giving a specific time frame on that.
Okay.
It was just sort of a warning, you just aren't going to see the benefits because it takes a while for people to become healthy and to change their habits, so therefore to improve their health and reduce their medical costs.
So I'm trying to read through this, so are we saying there's no correlation possibly because the study was a few years after they started this program, or?
The studies looked at a whole lot of programs with it. Some are new, some are old. It's just that and we'll talk a little bit because I'm going to switch over to the City of Portland's wellness programs. The trick is and we'll show you some of our data, it's just hard to link the two together. And so why don't we walk through for the City of Portland, I can get you a little bit more specific with us, then we can come back and look at that. So if you look at slide 16, I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but this is just an idea to show you. This is most of the Cities of Portland's wellness programs. They offer a ton of them, and they target various different types of medical conditions or various types of ways of improving health for people. All this source is the website, as well as Kathy Bless, the City of Portland's benefit manager who oversees the wellness programs. Part of what happens here when you're trying to analyze these programs, and we'll go into this in a couple more slides, is these programs have evolved over time, so it's hard to track how each of these little programs has worked and where the benefit are from. The city's first wellness program started in 1998, and if you look under City Core Medical Plan, there's Healthy Foundations, which is offered by MODA, and it's considered their core wellness program. That started in 2013 with that. If you look at slide...
Are these wellness programs that are available to everyone in?
Yes, these are available to all employees. Good question, because I didn't cover that. They're available to all employees in the city, including police and fire. There's no limitation.
Do you have the data on how many people actually access it?
Well, I'll go over that here in just a minute here. You're getting a couple slides ahead of me, because that's one of the challenges that we have. So if you look at slide 17, there's some more wellness programs that are available in the city. EAP, it's a standard EAP program. It does involve counseling, so this is often how people will enter mental health issues is coming through EAP, and they will get them into the chain potentially for additional counseling or even psychiatric help. So this is how they enter into that. Preventive Care Initiative, I just put this in here because this is what the city was wanting just put in place. Prior to the preventive care going in place, the city paid for 95% of the medical premiums for each employee, which is pretty darn good. With this program, they reduced it to 90%, but the employee could get that 5% back if they see a doctor once every 2 years. So that's the way they're trying to encourage people to see the doctor, and it's just once every 2 years. And then you have on this list in the bottom are some special ones that were put together for the PPA. And I think they've been around for 10 years. But there was just some special programs that they had put together with it. So there's a boatload of wellness programs out here for everybody. Again, they're open with the exception maybe the PPA stuff. But I think if you look at PPA stuff, they correlate very highly with the other programs that are already out there. But all the other programs are available to all employees, including police and fire. So on slide 18, so this is per Kathy Bless. Okay, why did the city go into a wellness program? Their goal was to keep the increase in medical premiums at 5%. They weren't looking to reduce the medical premiums, they were looking to control them and keep them at 5%.
Or less.
Or less, correct. And per Kathy Bless, the city is meeting that goal for the past several years with it, so they consider this a success. They also feel that this supports the employer of choice effort by the city, again, trying to attract new people to work for the city and show why the city is a good place to come work for. The city, they said specifically, the city was not looking for a decrease in workers' compensation costs. That was never their intent, and they never considered it when they put these programs together. And that includes not only city workers' comp, but Fpdr. They weren't looking at doing that. That was not their goal. So the challenges to the wellness program in general, the programs are not mandatory. You don't even have to participate in the preventive care initiative. There's a penalty for not doing it, but there is no incentive or disincentive for that. Measuring use of the programs. Goes back, I think, to your question here, Jason. Is the providers measure how many people are participating in the program, but they don't track it by bureau. They don't track it by detailed information, and a lot of their tracking includes both employees and their dependents, if their dependents can use these programs. Part of this is why they don't track it at the individual level is due to HIPAA. They can't provide certain information to the city. They can't say how many, and so they get reluctant to even try to get into that gray area. Is it covered by HIPAA or is it not covered by HIPAA? The city's more concerned how many people overall are participating, what kind of results are we seeing, and are we seeing that our medical premiums are being held, and we're seeing that the overall usage is out there for these programs.
Does the city measure their participation against a benchmark?
That I don't know with that.
Good question.
The interesting that Kathy Buss brought up was how to get information about wellness programs to both police officers and firefighters. For the city, for everybody else in the city, they send a lot of emails out to people telling them programs that are coming, various classes that are out there. We get stuff in the mail. There's sometimes posters that are up in the bureau or in the offices. The challenge you have with police and fire is they don't use email like every other city employee. They don't go into it every day or very often with it. So email is not a very good way to convey certain information. They also found that there's some culture with both bureaus is that they tend to rely on peer-to-peer information and information coming from the union. So it's hard to get them to pay attention sometimes. It's a challenge that they have with benefits across the board is how do they get information to police and fire in a way that people listen to it. And they are getting participation. They know there's participation, but we do not have any numbers of how police and fire are participating in any of these programs. And the city just is not tracking it to that depth at this point. I'll follow up with Kathy, but when she and I spoke, they weren't capturing that data for it.
Well, let me ask just a general question. Is the general sense that while it might not be saving money per se, does it seem to be programs that are paying for themselves in that whatever it costs to administer and run the programs, that you're probably seeing an equivalent reduction in claim costs, even though you might not be saving any real dollars?
For us?
Yeah, or just in general through the city.
I'm not quite certain how they've gone in detail in measuring the cost for that. I think, again, they're looking at that higher level market as what's it doing to our premiums.
Okay.
And I'm certain there's more. If we needed to, we get Kathy Bless coming in here and talk in more detail about the wellness programs and how they're administered with it. Because if we do want more information, I can ask her if she wanted to come in and just go into more detail with this. So on to slide 19 here. So how does this impact FPDR claims? So we have no proof or indication that the City of Port Neches wellness programs had any impact on our claims or costs. Because here's the challenges that we have. We have no concrete data on when various wellness programs started. Because as I showed you that big page worth of all of us, all these programs have come in, some other programs have gone out, they've evolved over time, so it's hard to really attribute an effective start date to when a particular program would potentially have an impact on FPDR. We know when the first one started, we know when the major one that MOTA puts out there, so 1998 to 2013, but it's when you try to do data and do correlations, if you can't set specific start dates, it's very difficult to compare timelines. And again, we have no specific data on police or fire participation in these wellness programs. So we can't get down to figure out how many police officers, firefighters participate in them. Because again, as I said, they don't track it to that level, and if they do, sometimes it gets mixed in with family members as well as active duty people. So they may say, we just can't have access to that data. And without data, we can't actively link wellness efforts to it, but we're not seeing it. So I'll go to the next two slides and just grabbed a couple slides to show you that I'm not seeing trends that I could tie to that. So if you want to jump over to the first slide we have, This is a slide that shows the number of disability claims filed over the last 15 years. So I blew this back out for 15 years and look at it. As you can see, it's variable between 300 and 375. It sort of just ebbs and flows over the time. There really is no indication. You know, we've gone through our look at as to why do they ebb and flow. We can't find any correlations with any activities that we know of with the bureaus or with the plan design. So the next one on slide 21 does show quite a bit of an impact, but I'll tell you where this impact came from. So first of all, the number of claims being submitted hasn't really changed. They're pretty steady between a window, but the amount of that we're paying out on an annual basis on claims has declined. Number one, what that indicates, there's two things that can cause that to happen. Some of our longer-term disability people are finally moving into retirement age and dropping off the plan, or what we're also seeing is shorter duration claims. So we may have the same number of claims, but people are returning to work in 2 to 3 months or 6 months versus staying on for 6, 12, or even for the duration until they retire. So what's caused this? So we can tell you what's caused this. It doesn't tie to any wellness program. It ties to a few things. We had the charter reform, which I talked about earlier, had moved the responsibility for the claim management and claim investigation into Fpdr. We were using best practices of workers' comp to investigate the claims, and that was by charter edict. That's one of the things that was to happen with that. We also had transitional duty. This program has, it started around 2007. The bureaus have taken it to heart, and again, Kim will go over this in a little bit more. It's an opportunity that we can get people back to work in a light duty or modified duty positions with the intent that they'll recover and return to work. It's always shown that recovery happens faster if somebody can come back to work even in light duty versus sitting at home in their lazy boy chair with a remote and a can of beer. They have some incentive to come back to work. And again, we've always noticed that there's a strong work ethic that our members just don't want to stay home. They always are looking ways. We've got some that are probably trying to get back to work too soon with it, but that's what we're looking at. So this is attributed to some changes in the plan and how we've administered and managed those claims. Again, we can find no link to this to any of the wellness programs as to why they're there. And it's not to say, in short, that there isn't a link between wellness and workers' comp, but it's not obvious. Nobody in any of the studies has been able to find it or truly document that it's happened. We've looked at our data, and nothing's jumping out at us. We're not seeing any trends that we can't otherwise explain with it. The theory is gee, if you've got a healthier workforce, they're less likely to get injured. And that's a great theory, but unfortunately, there just isn't documentation out there or statistics out there to back that up at this point.
Are you saying that in our program there isn't, or there isn't?
There isn't anywhere in there. There is, because when we look at studies out there, again, you get past the hype that's out there in it. There's no study that has shown a strong correlation or any correlation between workers' comp claim instances and workers' comp expenses to a wellness program. Theoretically, you would think it, but there's no data out there anywhere to support it. And I will tell you, I looked online, and there were some headlines that say we got 36% reduction in workers' comp, but you read the article, no, this was all marketing hype, and they couldn't cite, or they gave no studies, and when you read further, it really didn't, the headline didn't match the text in it. So I keep looking for hardcore studies, academic type studies, to let's prove it and get out of the marketing hype. And I've not been able to find anything, and there is no real literature out there. And the city is not seeing it with their workers' compensation plan. So I just can't do it. And again, theoretically, it should help out. But
when you say you just can't do it, what do you
mean?
You just said I just can't do it. I don't know what you're talking about.
We can't get the data out there. I mean, because we don't have the utilization data that we would need to track it. And then again, just because you just can't get the data you need to run this kind of study.
Or that a study hasn't been developed to ask that particular question
that's correct.
yet.
Yeah.
From what you've described about the city's interest in doing this, the city was interested in addressing several different issues.
Right.
And even the employer of choice, we've tried to make ourselves an attractive employer, this being one of the things that we have done. It's really hard to do a controlled experiment and say, but for this wellness program, would we still have been as successful as we are in hiring people? Hard to tell. We haven't done that controlled experiment. So it seems like the question that we're asking, is there a correlation between wellness and workers' comp, is not a question that has been introduced in a data-driven study. So we're trying to draw a correlation or a correlation where there is just no data. And so we're thinking that there should be a relationship, but we don't have proof of that because we're not tracking that data. Nobody else is tracking that data. We went in to reduce our medical premiums. That was it, and be a more attractive employer. But again, on the employment side, it's kind of hard to measure something that what would the outcome be if you didn't have it?
So what was I might have missed the beginning. Why did you put this together?
Well, you guys asked for this information the last meeting.
I know you brought up something and we kind of questioned what you said about, I think you made a statement about how they weren't correlated.
Well, we talked about, I don't know how it came up last time, but Brian had asked some questions about the wellness programs and having people see doctors once a year. How is that paying back the city in reducing work-related benefits? Brian, I've got sort of a quote here. He wanted to show that proactive health programs, which we interpreted as wellness programs, negotiated union contracts are providing value to the city. And Jason, you said you want proof that people becoming healthier impacts FPDR disability claims. And Catherine Elizabeth, both of you said you wanted meaningful data to help us with those programs. So that's the conversation, and those are the takeaways that I was looking for on this one. And then we come back up, there is no meaningful data.
Well, you didn't find any meaningful data.
Well, but also
We have no meaningful data in the city, and nobody else has shown a study anywhere that they've got meaningful data. If somebody can find a study with meaningful data, send it to me and I'll be glad to look at it. But I've searched and searched and searched, and I can find no study attempting to link workers' comp to a wellness program.
And as you pointed out, HIPAA is a very real constraint that we have to work with in terms of tracking data.
Absolutely, and so if you don't have the data,
Right.
doesn't mean it's not there. And when you say workers' comp, maybe we're having a little, we're not connecting here. I'm talking about wellness and making people's lives better and how it might affect the employer and the jobs we do. And maybe it doesn't spill over into necessarily workman's comp and how you can pull a number out and say, it doesn't affect us. It's as a whole, I believe wellness has
and I think
benefits.
that the study here did say, because I just want to say the study said cost savings are there for the long term. I maybe didn't say that. Yes, they are saying that wellness programs can pay off in the long term with it, and most of it is in control of premiums as well as improve productivity and decrease absences. Those are the measures that most employers are using to evaluate wellness. These studies did show that, but I was looking at this in the intent of trying to trace it down because the discussion was how all this impacts FPDR. And so I'm trying to say is that we can't prove anything that it does impact FPDR. We have issues, like I said, through here trying to gather the data. We don't know when there's data out there and we don't have what's necessary to try to correlate the two.
And the wellness programs, as you identified on an earlier slide, various items keep getting added over time.
Yeah.
So it might be that we need to have this discussion 5 or 10 years from now. And because the impact is really a longer term impact.
Yeah.
Now, a couple things. You said getting program information to the right audience is difficult. We have liaisons in each of the 2 bureaus. We have HR business partners who are embedded in the 2 bureaus. So there are ways to...
And I think they do. This was a challenge of how to get it out. It's a lot different than it is to get it out to regular employees. And they do strive to get the information out. So I don't mean to leave it that they aren't getting information out to police and fire. It's just they have to use creative ways to do it that aren't used for the rest of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Kim, so we'll switch over to the regular disability slides. Kim?
Yeah, thank you. So we'll start by looking at the number of claims filed this last fiscal year. And if we look at this over a 5-year period, we see that the number of claims filed overall have continued to decline slightly compared to last year's total, with a continued decline since its peak in 15-16. And we see that we are at the lowest number of claims filed when we look at the past 5 years overall. When we break this down by police and fire claims, we see the dramatic decrease in police claims from its peak in 15-16, again going through to 17-18. When we look at the fire claims, while they've had a peak in 13-14, the numbers essentially are about the same. They did have a slight increase in claims filed from fiscal year ending 17 through this past fiscal year. So in the upcoming slides, we'll break this down by the types of losses that they've had. So next, we're going to look at the disability program accept and deny rates. And we see that for this last year, 89% of the claims filed were approved. 6% were denied, which is about average, with the exception of the dip in 15-16. When we look at the remaining about 5%, we know that these are claims that have been withdrawn by the member or incomplete application for benefits filed by the member. And typically, for your information, a claim is withdrawn when the member has initiated information from their doctor or Fpdr has initiated information, and it's just the provider has said, this condition or claim isn't work-related. And so typically the members will voluntarily withdraw their claim for benefit. And typically what an incomplete application means is that, they may have had the injury, they felt like they were going to go seek treatment. Later on they've decided, hey, I'm okay, I don't need to follow through with the application process, and we just mark it as incomplete. So now we're going to look at the approved fire claims for this last year, and we see that we've got when we're looking at injury cause, we see that 25% of their injuries were caused by lifting. Kind of no surprise that the injuries are caused by lifting, even in the setting of their attempts to do some fitness training in that. They still have scenarios where they're trying to lift someone down a narrow stairwell and not being able to use proper body mechanics. So the lifting itself, the types of injuries they have with lifting is expected. We have 9% of the injuries resulting from communicable disease exposures this past year, tied by 9% for slip and trip, no fall type injuries, and then 6% due to overexertion. Again, these are the lifting type activities at the scene of a call. There's this big 51% that is kind of a culmination of all kinds of injuries, but they didn't rise to the numbers that were worth reporting. And typically when we are putting this information together, it is used by the police and fire bureaus to look at, what are the larger number of injuries in a category, so that they can use that for their loss prevention or loss reduction efforts. And so we do have, for the injury cause category, options for 63 different types of injuries. Again, we try to report the most evident causes for purposes here. So when we look at body part, we see that 20% of the injuries are to their backs, followed by 12% to their shoulders, 11% for the knee, and then we have 8% tied for multiple body parts and abdomen, which tend to be hernia claims, followed by, and again, the 41% is other body parts that we didn't report here. When we look at our injury locations, we see that 58% of their injuries occur at the scene of a call, not a surprise, followed by 22%, at the station, and 11% at the training site. And we have 6% at other locations, followed by 3% at multiple locations, which tend to really be illness and occupational disability type claims. So next we'll look at police. So when we look at the injury cause for police, we see that 13% of the claims were caused by assault, followed by 11% due to motor vehicle accidents, 8% by falls, and 7% communicable diseases. We know that many of the police injuries are tied to altercations during arrest, pursuing suspects, that type of thing. And when we look at the body parts, we see that 21% of the injuries this past year were multiple, not surprising, coming from an altercation type scenario, followed by 13% to the knee, 12% to their fingers and hands, and then 10% to their back. Again, the other categories are several different body parts. One of the things that we want to point out is that the injuries to the fingers and hands seem small, but they can be career-ending for an officer who is unable to shoot a gun or to apprehend a suspect. So while they're small body parts, big impact on our members when they have injuries to the fingers. So when we look at injury location, we see that 54% occur at the scene of a call, followed by 19% at the training site, and 12% for motor vehicles, followed by 7% at the precinct, which also tend to involve training, and then 3% listed as none, and those are typically tied to our non-service claims, which are just not coded the same as our service-connected injury claims.
I recognize there's a lot of data here. It would be interesting to look at trends over time. This is a snapshot in time.
Sure.
So something we can talk about probably offline on how to do that.
And we have the data because we've got, I think, 10 years of these slides
Yeah.
here, so
Yes.
at least we
Yeah.
pull the slides
do
up
that.
and we can get it, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just to see trends.
Yeah.
Interesting. Since we're stopped just briefly, I hate to go back, but a similar comment. There's tremendous information here, so thank you very much. But in years where you've got like numbers of claims or something, or numbers of pensioners per year, for me, it would always be helpful if I knew the number of active people as well, so that we could get a sense of whether the number itself was for a static population, or if the population was really increasing, but the claims were level, then it's actually an improvement.
Yeah.
So that'd be
Yeah.
helpful.
Thank you. So we'll go on to the next slide, which is a disability cost by fiscal year. And this year we're showing a slight decrease again in overall time loss and medical costs compared to last year. Looking at our time loss costs specifically, we see that the costs have continued to decrease since 2014. When we consider that one of the earlier slides, Sam talked about the percentage of workers on disability, the percent of workforce on disability, we are able to make some assumptions that the duration of time on disability is less. And so we look at that. We contribute that to some collaborative efforts of the Bureau, and Fpdr, in trying to get people back to work as soon as possible following injury. And we'll follow up a little more about when we talk about the transitional duty in a later slide. We see that the medical costs have also decreased slightly since its peak in 2014, and that our costs are a bit higher than our low in 2015 for medical. Costs for medical care continue to rise, so it's important that we continue our efforts to utilize our managed care organizations, to work with the doctors to ensure that treatment is reasonable and necessary without compromising the care that our members get. But those are some of the factors that we can use to contribute to keeping those costs at bay when we know that medical costs continue to rise. So next we'll look at the time loss components by fiscal year. In the slide 27, we see the breakdown of disability benefits. We've got the biweekly benefit shown in blue. The monthly disability benefit that we pay out is listed here in green, is shown in green. And then this rust or orange color is utilization of our transitional duty program. So when we look at our biweekly disability, our time loss costs for this past year, we've seen that we've paid less than we did the prior year. Bunch of effort that goes into that. Again, just working with the members to return to work and working with the doctors to make sure that, that they're getting the recovery time that they need, but that we can move them along and help with the recovery process as soon as possible. So the monthly disability paid out is for members who have had injuries and who are permanently total or permanently partial disabled. They are unable to return to police or fire employment. And for the first time in several years, we've had a member who was injured and was unable to return to their job at injury and was placed on a monthly disability benefit. The person is still able to pursue employment, so we do look at wage offset and things like that, and substantial gainful activity, which means that they're able to pursue earnings of 1/3 of their base pay at injury. So we continue to work with them, but that's the first time in a while, as we see the graph going downwards, or the bar going downwards, first time in a while that we've had somebody transition to a monthly disability benefit. And so as we look at our return to work, which is our transitional duty program, this past year we see that utilization of our program has decreased slightly. Our objective certainly is that the use of transitional duty may be stable or increase as far as utilization. It is our objective that it be that way. We know that there's a direct link to the recuperative benefits of early return to work following an injury for our members. So it is something that we promote and actively work with our liaisons to identify transitional duty positions for our members who have been injured. Certainly the benefit to the bureaus, they get skilled workers and we pay 75% of the wages. That's a win. And again, the recuperative benefits for the members, the ability to get back with their peers and be part of that work group is something that we want to see. We did do a breakdown of utilization between police and fire bureaus, and we have this year 77% of the transitional duty dollars reimbursed went to the police bureau, 22.3% to fire. We know that the police bureau we've been working with them, and that they had initiated an increase in the number of transitional duty positions available for their officers, so the utilization has increased. With fire, we have been in communication with them about utilization, increasing the utilization of the transitional duty program. We know that they're working on it. We understand some of the challenges that they have with staffing as far as keeping people at stations and that transition from a 24 on, 48 off schedule to a 40-hour work week. But we are in communication with them. We want them to utilize the program to its maximum if we can get that. And so that's one of the things that we're working on for this year.
So is one of the, so are you saying that the hindrance to participation or utilization is availability of positions within the bureaus?
Yeah, that's
okay.
one of their factors.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so our next slide, 28, days to claim decision by fiscal year, something that is always important. It is certainly an objective of our program to determine a member's entitlement to benefits as quickly as possible upon claim receipt. When we look at, and while providing great customer service to our members, that's an objective. When we look at the past 5 years, we see that we were taking longer to make claim decisions in 15-16. We wanted to work on that. We know that the reasons back then were multifactorial. We had an increase in the number of claims filed. We had more analysts looking at the claims, but we weren't satisfied with that and have worked really hard to make sure that we return to what are more acceptable preferred numbers for us. And so this year we have 64% of our claims were decided in 1 to 30 days from claim receipt. We have 27% that were decided in the 30 to 60 day range, and 9% were decided in 61 to 90 days. Those tend to be the more complex claims where we have to get medical input, medical records to tie things together. But it's a good effort on the team's part to make those decisions as quickly as possible. And then our last slide is our medical savings for fiscal year 2018. And this year we show that we saved $2.2 million, or 43% of billed overall this past year. A breakdown of that is 40% or 2.0 million were due to utilization of our Oregon fee schedule. That's a charter and administrative rule provision that allows for that. And we saved an additional 3% or 153,000 reductions due to our relationship with our MHN MCO, which they have negotiated additional savings from the providers individually utilizing our plan. So it's worth mentioning that the bill reduction abilities that we have in a lot of insured and self-insured organizations, they refer out and contract with and pay people to do this kind of work. We brought that in-house in 2013, and it was an effort between Sherry, RT, and our claims technician to get the coding in that in a database where we can have some speed as far as doing the bill audit and reduction. But another key component to that review is the ability to look at records to make sure that the doctors are charging us appropriately and not billing us for body parts that aren't part of the claim. And if they are, sorting that out. There's a lot of record review and requesting information to make sure that what we're being billed is what's appropriate for the claim. So it is something that we are allowed to do by charter and our administrative rule, but there is some work behind the numbers that to make sure that this occurs every year. And so I just wanted to share that with you.
It'll be interesting to look at that savings again as a trend over time.
Sure.
And see if we're improving every year or whether we've hit a plateau, or I just don't know.
Yeah, we can do that. Thank you.
And I do want to say, because when you look back in time, the staff that we have here, our claims technician, she's takes it upon herself sometimes to negotiate additional savings. We've had it, especially when the people go to a doctor out of state and they don't feel they're covered by the Oregon Workers' Compensation fee schedule, so we have to negotiate, and she does a very good job in getting it down. So it's helpful to have that in addition to her screening and looking at all these bills before they're paid. She's negotiated some on her own.
Good savings historically. So yeah.
Going to the next slide here, we're going to talk customer service. Just, Fpdr strives to offer excellent service. This is our mission, is to offer the excellent service to people, is treat people the way we like to be treated. And so we're constantly striving to improve the service we offer. Again, I want to say our staff prides themselves on their excellent customer service. So we're going to go over the next couple slides and look at some examples of the customer service improvements and actions that we've had over the last fiscal year.
Since some of this is IT stuff, they gave me a slide. So we did roll out our enhanced member portal for all our active members and retirees. And 775 members now have a portal account, and 26% of them are active members and 74% retirees. So one of the things that we did was, since 98.8% of our pension beneficiaries receive their benefits direct deposit, is we allowed them to get into the portal to actually view their statements. So there's been a big effort with our pension staff as well as the liaisons to go completely paperless. We're at 36% right now with our pension beneficiaries. They get their benefit direct deposited, and their pay statement notification is emailed to them, and then they have a chance to go into the portal and view their pay statement each month. As a result of that, we've had to joyfully help hundreds of members get individual and personal assistance in setting up their online portal account. So the liaisons have been doing a great job with that, and then as well as our staff. So we're really proud of that. We're hoping to get that number up for the number of people having their pay statement emailed. I believe it does increase a little bit each month, and as people get more familiar with what the portal can offer them.
If we were to break down these statistics by tier of membership, That might be an interesting thing to look at. I know I always focus on the direct deposit. I would hope that as we're bringing on new employees, new members, that we're at 100% for those numbers.
So we don't offer check to any new retirees. The few folks we have who are getting checks have been grandfathered in.
Yeah.
And our pension coordinator reaches out to them individually and constantly to encourage them to switch to direct deposit. I'm actually considering we do in-house visits for widows, and that we may do an in-house visit with the folks who live in the Portland area to say, hey, do you need us to help you fill out the paperwork? We'd be happy to come help you. I know that it's an obstacle for my own mother-in-law. So I know sometimes it can be a paperwork. So we're trying to do everything we can. It's just, to modernize our banking practices, but also in an emergency, in a continuity. We do have a backup check printer at the Fire Bureau. Thank you again, Fire Bureau. Thank you, Jay Guo. I'm sure you're not watching, but we test it once a year. So we do have a way to print checks maybe in an emergency, but boy, you can't beat direct deposit in an emergency. Right. And in terms of getting signed up for the portal, it is fascinating. I listen to the person on my staff who mostly helps folks with that. And there are a lot of very elderly folks who are really with the program. They call in, they want to get signed up. As soon as, sometimes he has to help them find the login button. Sometimes he's on the phone with them for 45 minutes. I hear him, he's right outside my office. But we really are taking folks step by step through, because once they're signed up and they know how to use it, then they'll do it, and we can stop mailing them things.
So you're talking to 3 people, maybe I should just speak for myself, but I've never seen it because I'm not a member.
Oh, this is true.
It might be interesting
to have like a demo of the portal
for us.
That would be nice.
About what it is. And
we have a test person. I believe his name is Batman. Is that right?
A test account.
What's Batman's real name? I forget. Anyway, we have a test person that Sherry might be able to do that sometime.
And one of the other things that we're working on with the new website reformat is offer services online that will give instructions with pictures and kind of walk them through the process as well. So it's been very interesting to go through that process and to really document exactly all the different steps to not only set up your account in very much detail, because some people need that detail, and then show them the things that they can do with that account. So,
thank you.
Some additional, on the next slide, is a couple additional customer service things that were of note that occurred this year. Is that there was a firefighter who suffered a catastrophic injury in the explosion in North Portland. There was a lot of effort between Fpdr, the Fire Bureau, the medical providers, the member, to get this person the proper coverage, the proper assistance at home, and proper type of physical therapy to get this person back to work. You looked at the original medical records, you're quite surprised that the person is back to work, and he's back to work with a full release with it. So there's a lot of effort, a lot of stuff. We have a nurse case manager that we hire, and she spends her time, actually will coordinate some of the efforts between all the members and with us. It's well worth our time to have somebody help coordinate this, because that's one thing that often lacks with people who have catastrophic injuries is a coordinator. So we hire that person to help coordinate it. So that was a big plus, especially for the member, for the Fire Bureau to get an experienced lieutenant back to work, and then also just for us getting somebody back to work. That's part of one of our goals. We also had another member who had a very near fatal medical condition, and this was again where we had a nurse case manager to help align some of the things that were happening while the person was recovering, making sure the care and what kind of home care and physical therapy and stuff this member needed to recover after they returned home. So again, we do spend some time and effort and some money to help out with these catastrophic claims. Even if they can't return to work, they need this help to do it. It makes it smarter and better medical care up front, helps them with a better life in the future, whether they can return to work or whether they can function at home effectively. With that. So we're done here with a regular presentation. Any questions on the presentation before we ask some comments from the...
I think we interrupted all through.
No, that's all fine.
My
So we're going to go
question's
back
answered.
and put all our notes together and figure out see what we need to do to answer the questions and
Thank you.
take care of some of your suggestions with that. Okay, so if I think we have Chief Myers here.
Thank you.
I think he's going to. Thank you. Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
The commissioners' meeting. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Myers. I'm the fire chief with the city of Portland. Please excuse me on a couple of issues. One, I have to leave right after I finish my comments. I'm actually supposed to be in the commissioner's office giving my regular report. So if you'll be okay to excuse me afterward, I'd appreciate that. So thank you. Second, I want to beg your forgiveness at the beginning also. I'm very, very passionate about this subject. There isn't anything more important to me than the condition of firefighters and the health and wellness of my staff. I've been around the business for 30 years. I've seen a lot happen, been involved in a lot of difficult incidents, and so I'm going to share with you some of my personal comments this afternoon. I had a presentation prepared to give you, and after watching the presentation given today, I've shifted and I'll be off the cuff. During the conversation, we had a little bit of I had the opportunity to listen to a little bit of a discussion back and forth regarding slide 15, and that there was no correlation between wellness programs and workers' comp incidents. In fact, I thought I'd heard the comment making that there was no documentation, no study to support wellness programs and work comp expense, or that possibly heard no documentation, no study to support a healthy employee reduces work comp expense. I'll review the tape, but I cannot disagree with that more. It is about the type of wellness program you deliver. I'm just going to give you my personal experience. So years ago, I was the fire chief in the city of Las Vegas. We didn't have a health and wellness program there. We had something similar to what we had in the city. We didn't have a robust health and wellness program for our firefighters. We instituted NFPA 1582 physicals. That's National Fire Protection Association. The number of the document is 1582. I'm sure you're familiar with it. We hired a physician, we hired a nurse, and we put every firefighter mandatory through the physical. And our expenses actually the first year went up because these are individuals that had never had a physical before, and we put them through maximal physicals, meaning we put them on a treadmill, we ran them until their heart rate hit their maximum, until if they were going to have a heart attack in a fire, they would have one there on the treadmill first. And we wanted to have that near heart attack experience in the clinical setting, so we knew that they were high risk for heart attack, and we would change the outcome before we sent them back. We caught early cancers through ultrasound use and other tests, and we were able to treat them years before they actually turned into be what would stage 4 cancers later. We were able to turn individuals around that had high risk for heart attack. Instead of sending them back to the floor, to the fire floor to fight fire, we actually treated them over time and made them better. And if we didn't have that program, we would have never known. We would have never known. And I've been here for 2 years. The first 18 months I was here, I spent several hours through the night bedside with 2 firefighters that had cardiac arrests in the fire station. Our program, when we started, we actually, it was an odd way we got to starting the program. The city of Las Vegas had a terrible real estate bust. And if you probably recall that, and it was very difficult, and I was faced with millions of dollars of reduction requests from the city and how I was going to fund that. We actually funded majority of it through this program because our claims costs for heart and lung and what is a growing issue in the fire service is cancer, which I think you already know about, but I'll cover it a little bit before I go because it is an impending thing. We were able to explain to the city that if you give us the chance to put the physicals on and make it mandatory for every firefighter, we'll catch this stuff early and I can control these costs. We reduced claim costs in the city of Las Vegas by millions of dollars over a period of time. Millions. And to say that wellness programs, there's no study, no documentation out there that wellness programs can reduce work comp expense is absolutely erroneous. That or I don't know what I experienced. And that's just my personal experience. I will bring back dozens of reports if that's what we need to show that wellness programs do have a significant impact on claims reduction. In fact, when I came to Portland, that was going to be my big win. I thought I'll tell the city right away, if you don't have, the Portland Fire does not have before I got here, did not have NFPA 1582 physicals available. So I thought, no problem, this will be very wowing. I'll tell them I'll implement one. The cost is probably about $90,000 a year for the overtime to get the employees mandatory to go, and a few more dollars from to pay for the NFPA 1582 physicals. They will realize millions of dollars in claims reduction. I didn't know it does not actually come out of the city revenue fund, so there wasn't a big bite on that. But I'm telling you here as the trustee board that it'll be a huge impact if we can get it done. And this year, we were able to get funding to actually have the NFPA 1582 physicals. They're not mandatory, and they won't be good until we get them mandatory, because that's the only way you got to force those firefighters to go, to take care of themselves. But we will catch cancers early, and we will catch heart and lung issues early. And if we can correct these things early, I won't be sitting next to these firefighters that are in cardiac arrest with their family. So I absolutely 100% disagree. It is about the wellness program that you select. So I'd be glad to give a complete presentation to you at some point if that was something the board would ever entertain. Be absolutely more than happy to do that. Just speaking of cancer, I think you know this, but I'm going to cover it if you don't. Cancer is the most dangerous threat to firefighters' health and safety today. I beg my forgiveness. I'm going to shift to some notes. Used to be all we talked about was heart and lung, right? Those were the big issues. And cancer has now become the leading cause of death for firefighters, and it happened relatively overnight. Cancer caused 61% of the career firefighter line of duty deaths from January 2002 to March 31st, 2017, according to the data from the National Association of Firefighters. Heart disease caused 18% of career line of duty deaths from the same period. Cancer caused 70% of the line of duty deaths for career firefighters in 2016. And firefighters have a 9% higher risk of being diagnosed with cancer and a 14% higher risk of dying from cancer than the general U.S. population, according to the CDC, National Institute for Occupational Health and Safety. A firefighter's risks are significantly higher for some specific types of cancer than the general population. In 2013, NIOSH researchers reported a twofold excess of malignant mesothelioma, a very rare cancer. Put another way, firefighters have a 100% increase of getting mesothelioma. Firefighters have a 129% increased risk of dying from mesothelioma, and in 2006, a meta-analysis of 32 firefighter cancer studies noted a twofold excess for testicular cancer. And firefighters have a 62% higher risk of getting esophageal cancer, and they have a 39% increased risk from dying from esophageal cancer, according to the NIOSH research. They have a testicular cancer risk of 2.2 times the risk, mesothelioma 2 times the risk, multiple myeloma 1.53 times the risk, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 1.5 times the risk, skin cancer 1.3 times the risk, melanoma 1.3 times the risk, brain cancer 1.3 times the risk, prostate cancer 1.2 times the risk, colon cancer 1.2 times the risk, leukemia 1.14 times the risk. It is a team effort to get these cancer risks down. I know that it's going to increase claims cost over time. We'd be ignorant to think it won't. We have to get ahead of the curve. I do believe NFPA physicals will catch cancers early. That's one part of it. I know we're partners with claims reduction. I want you to know that on my strategic plan in Portland Fire and Rescue, we have on the strategic, which I'm held responsible for, right? That's my responsibility and what I hold my performance review to. That by our program, our strategic plan runs till 2020. We expect to have a 10% reduction in firefighter injury from our 2016 rates by 2020. I am interested in bringing these injury rates down. We have a goal of getting to 0 firefighter casualties, and those casualties are the casualties that cause an overnight stay at the hospital. I want major casualties in the fire department to be 0. So you have my commitment to try to work on those things. There are best practices out there for cancer reduction. There's the top 25 list of things that we can do to reduce cancer in the fire service. We're doing every one of these. We just received monies for a second set of turnouts. Changing the fire hood that they wear around their neck, it doesn't sound like much, it's extremely important. They absorb all those cancers through their skins. We take showers now after we fight fire. We clean our equipment like we've never cleaned it before. We decontaminate at the scene. We don't wear our gear back into the place where we lived. When I was a firefighter, you went to bed, took your turn-up pants off right there at the bed and got into bed, and you lived in the environment. We don't do that anymore. It takes the Fire Bureau, it takes the employee, it takes me as a leader of this organization, and it takes you and the trustees as a team to help kick this. I just want you to know I'm aware of it. I want to give you the confidence that I'm on point on it, and you have my absolute 100% support to make sure that we reduce cancer in the fire service and we reduce claims. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you.
Any questions for me?
You need to run out.
I do.
Okay.
Unless you have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Chief. For the record, my name's Alan Firstwall. I'm president of the Portland Firefighter Association. I believe there's no other chiefs here. Sam, he's talking. So it's my turn, so I'm going to go. Sam, nobody else for the chiefs to speak? No. Okay. And I'm going to piggyback on some of the things that the fire chief said. And I got hired in 2001, and shortly after that, we started a wellness program with OHSU. And it was very similar to the NFPA physicals that the fire chief talked about. And we luckily, unluckily, but we placed 4 stents, and I think we caught 1 or 2 cancers prematurely. And so as we talk about, we talk about wellness programs and different stuff like that, anecdotally, I know that I've seen in my career where it has been prevented or, has been addressed. And really it is about the wellness program. When you look at the City Strong and the other stuff that the city offers for their wellness programs, we only had 1 or 2 firefighters that were active in those. Those actually target really people with unhealthy lifestyles, and I'm not saying me and Jason are the healthiest people, but the firefighters, we try and work out every day. There's a culture of staying in shape. And so we actually weren't really, we were not specified for those type of programs. They would look at people with multiple risk factors, diabetes and different stuff like that, and it's really not prevalent in our workforce right now. And I will give you a little background. I'm the co-chair of the LMBC, the Labor Management Benefit Committee, so I do have some background on what we do there. Over the past 18 months, since the fire chief has been here in 2 years, not only did we have the Northwest gas explosion, but again, as he said before, we had 2 cardiac arrests on duty. One of those members will never return to duty. He ended up retiring. He was in his 50s. The other person, again, it was on duty, and I've gotten the call twice in the past 18 months of, hey, we're doing CPR on one of your members and we're on to the hospital right now. Difficult days. Thank goodness both of them survived. The technology in the past 10 or 20 years for heart-related issues is very good. We can get people into a cath lab and save their lives. Those are the type of stuff, and we have one really serious mesothelioma case that's going on right now. Those are the cases that the fire chief and I are trying to avoid. Those are what we're trying to catch sooner. So with the implementation of those 1582 physicals, I did mine, went through Kaiser, 3 hours. I did A, I did B, I did C, I did my chest x-ray. They did find one medical condition that I am working on, and that's what we want to do. I'm 42 years old. This is the time to catch those cases. That's the type of wellness program that we're looking at. It's not the City Strong, it's not anything like that. It's the full implementation of the 1582 physicals. And I did get just some screenshots of it. The larger departments that did implement them, Seattle, San Francisco, and I will get the study to Sam, he can disseminate it to the board, but under the cost of justification, all those see a 2-to-1 savings on how much they had before. So it's not anecdotal, especially in the fire service where we have very specific wellness programs. We are seeing a very good return on that. I do want to go over some other stuff that's happening with our members really quickly, and I know that we've talked about the erosion of benefits with retirees and the cost of living, and appreciate the board looking at it with the cost of living adjustment very much capped at this point. And we do hear from our retirees, no, there's nothing that the board can do at this point, but I just want you to know our retirees continue to tell us, hey, the cost of living after 5 years is a lot different because of that 1.25%. Something for our active members that's very concerning is as the legislature looks at changing the IAP program for our members. again, they're seeing a even more difficult chance of being able to retire, healthy and with respect and at the end of their career. And we don't want firefighters, I won't speak for the police, but we don't want firefighters in their 60s working on the line. It's not healthy, it's not good for them, it's not good for the citizens. If they're in great health, that's great. But really, you want a younger workforce being able to do the work that we do. Those type of limitations with the reductions in their pensions, it's difficult for our members as they go on. So very much a hot button issue with our members, as you can imagine. Some of the other stuff, our members, we are struggling with mental health in our membership, and I'm sure you've watched some of the stuff that's happened, whether it's the Northwest gas explosion or even the cardiac arrest that we have. Those members, in our system in Fpdr, stress claims are, and I won't phrase it, that they can't apply for them, but stress is deemed to be a normal part of their job. And so if somebody does have a occupational injury with stress, it's termed to be a part of their job, and it's not a covered event. As we move forward in the fire department, what we've done is we've actually stopped talking or started talking about stress. It's not something that you just, hey, go sit in the corner and suck it up and do it. We're bringing mental illness out of the shadows. And it's something I think the board needs to look at, is how do we take care of our members that are in those injuries and going forward. I do want to say thanks to the staff. I can tell you that every interaction that I have, from Stacy Jones to everybody, it's professional, it's good. I can't say enough that I appreciate their responsiveness and their professionalism dealing with us. One or two more things. I do know, as we looked at the time of injury, I just wanted to point out one or two things, and we did have some injuries that were at that 90-day window. And just remember, when the 07 changes came, our members go right on injury leave, and so that they're assumed that it is going to be approved. If you do have a claim that's up to 90 days, and essentially, and it gets reversed and they deny that claim, that member has to come back and pay back all that time. And so you're looking at, and say they don't have any vacation, say they don't have any sick leave, and say the annual salary is not annual, but the monthly salary is $7,000, and you make a claim go out 90 days, that's $21,000 that they would owe the city. So every day that goes by that we don't know whether that claim is approved or not is difficult on our members. There used to be an expediting committee pre-2007, and that's probably one of the best things that was there that is no longer there. And those members could get a quick turnaround on those claims. And so staff is doing a great job. I would just really encourage the sooner the better, so that our members can deal with that. I'm just going to check over my notes real quick. I think that is the summary. I just have one more item, and that's for Sam as well, is cancer in the fire service has been a very prevalent thing. The federal government, actually House Resolution 931, was passed by the federal legislature. I won't say who signed it into law, but it is into law right now. And that tracks the cancer cases that we do have. And so the state of Oregon is start complying it. That will go to the CDC and say we're seeing this many thyroid cancers, this many testicular, this many breast cancers. And at the end, we do want to know what is causing our cancers and what are higher incidence. But on the back end, it's going to reduce those cancers. That's why we take baby wipes. Anything now, our wet neck, we clean that off right after a fire. And that type of prevention is what we're trying to do, is work with the government, find out what those cancers are and how we can prevent them in the future. So thank you for your time. I'm here to answer some questions. I'm going to stay if you do have any. And if you don't, I will excuse myself.
Questions?
Great.
I do have one, just a general one. Obviously, you and the chief are very passionate about the wellness issues and prevention, which I agree with, and I'm glad to see the efforts are so strong. I don't, in my own mind, I don't know how much of some of those things are medical screening versus wellness per se. That typically people think of wellness programs as smoking cessation and weight loss and exercise and lifestyle kinds of things. Certainly those would impact, the kinds of things you'd see with these physicals you're describing. But it strikes me as a line difficult to understand what's medical screening versus wellness. But I applaud the efforts to do that. And I think my question is, obviously, you're presenting this to us. What can we do? What are you looking to have us? How are would we participate?
Thank you, and I'll answer, if your first is a question, then I'll answer that if that's okay. And
Oh, yeah.
in the fire service, a lot of our wellness is similar to what would be a checkup for some people. Some people would go into the doctor once a year and get their blood pressure checked. So part of our wellness program at the City of Portland in the fire is that every year we have to go in and do a physical agility test. That's part of our health and wellness program. And in the wellness fitness initiative that's made by the fire chiefs and the union, that is a part of it. So that assessment and whether you can continue to do the job and throw a ladder and do how many push-ups and everything, that is a part of our wellness program. I think it's different than a city type of a program, and that's how it kind of dovetails. You have been a part of some of the wellness programs before and risk reduction injuries. So I think, and I don't have the dates in front of me, Gabe Sansone was the fire liaison. So over the past 10 years, I would say you've been active at trying to reduce injuries. And I think that even though you are separate from the city, there has to be the conversation of going, if you're trying to get somebody to go to the doctor and you're going to say you get a 90% monthly premium versus a 95, the city should be looking at how to reduce your guys' cost as well. And you should be doing the same on the back end. I think there's conversations of going, what is a true wellness program? Who pays for that program? Again, I'm here for advocate for the firefighters, but if we can catch, whether it's the city, whether it's Fpdr, if we can catch the cancers early, the heart attacks earlier, you're going to save money on the back end. And then that's the investigation for the board to do, is how deep do you get into the wellness programs?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll talk all up on some of the stuff, Joe. A couple of things I just want to bring up here. The challenge that we have in Fpdr is not that we don't want to participate in these plans. Our mission and direction is set out by the charter, and it is a very narrow mission, which is to pay benefits. And so some of the stuff is to where some of the programs I know that the Fire Bureau has been looking for are large dollar amounts, and that gets beyond the scope of our mission as described by the charter, and it's unfortunate that we get that division. And it's also unfortunate that Fpdr is separated from the city by the fund that funds us and funds the city. So at times, I don't know if it was the chief brought into the fact that some of the programs they wanted, they go, oh no, we don't care about how much it saves Fpdr, it's not part of the general fund. So by us being very unique, it sometimes creates a weird split between us and the city, which in other cities such as Las Vegas, there weren't separate. All of this stuff came out of the same fund. So what benefited the workers' compensation side benefited the city and vice versa. Unfortunately, we have the two funds, and I hate to say politically, if it comes out of Fpdr fund, that's fine. It does not rise up to the level to be examined at the higher levels in the city. So that's my comment on the politics, which makes this a challenge to how we can support some of these programs. With that,
I think that's definitely correct, but our interests are aligned, with the health of the firefighters, and that's good for the fund, it's good for the city, and it's good for our firefighters and our police.
Part of it, I agree with that, but like they're talking about buying extra set of turnouts and other equipment that the Fire Bureau wanted. Actually, they came to us and said, can you pony up the $250,000 the Fire Bureau wants to do all their programs? Unfortunately, the scope of what we do is that's not in the scope the charter allows us to do. I know it's an arbitrary thing, but we are designed to pay the benefits. We can support certain initiatives that come through here, but we have to have a direct correlation to how it saves us funds with this. And so it gets to be tough when you start looking at this stuff. Who's responsible really for the safety and welfare of our police and fire? I think we all are, but the first core comes from the particular bureau, that it needs to come from the city, has to be part of this picture, and they have to be willing to understand that it crosses both funds and both situations.
So we're using a lot of terminology like health, there's financial health, there's physical health, there's who pays, who benefits, et cetera, and depending on what hat you want to wear when you're answering those questions, you're right that you could be very narrow in scope, or you could be more broad and look at it on a citywide basis and say, citywide, the whole city benefits financially and physically if our firefighters and police are healthy, physically healthy, and we are minimizing the financial impact to the city overall as a taxpayer, because the taxpayers are paying for what goes into the general fund. They're also paying the levy that's going to support FPDR. So while we, as the FPDR board, might not be able to pay for the turnouts or to pay for the physician or nurse who's administering the, I forget the number, but the physical, that we could advocate or support it in words, recommending that the city general fund can pay for those things, knowing that taxpayers will benefit overall. So there's a path. It's just how we use our defined terms.
And part of it, though, is that FPDR, again, has never seen their mission is to be an advocate for how things are done outside.
Or let me use the word differently. Maybe not advocate, but to present the impact, the financial impact, that if this money were spent on the front end, there's a possibility of savings on the back end by having.
And I don't want to dive down too deep into a lot of this stuff, but when we talk about programs that have been instituted intending to reduce claim experience and claim expenses, we've not seen, it's not shown up in our numbers that we're getting the results that people think we should be getting are getting at all. We've had 2 or 3 things that we've paid for. There's been 0 results. It's not shown up in our claim counts. It's not shown up in our claim expenses that this program benefited for. Ideally, it should be good that these programs are instituted, but if you're looking, using the argument that it comes back and reduce our costs, we've not seen that on any program that's been introduced.
It sounds like maybe they weren't the right programs based on.
Well, it wasn't the right program, and I will also say when the programs
weren't mandatory, right?
Well, when the programs were put together, I had some issues with the programs, how they're put together. If we're going to be asked to participate in those programs, they will go through a more rigorous approach. We will set better baselines and better measurements and insist that they should, how are they going to show. I think there's some issues on the programs themselves. You know, as far as with the cancer, we did, I think I emailed all of you a few months ago. We did a cancer study of all the deaths over the past few years from cancer, of any retiree's death from cancer. So you saw that. Our numbers that we saw were different than the numbers that are shown in the city. I think we still saw heart greater than cancer versus where, you know, the chief was talking about it different. We've had that. We've presented a lot of data to the bureaus. There were some comments made here of wanting, by the Fire Bureau wanting to reduce injuries and therefore payments and save FPDR money. We've not been asked to give baseline data to those studies. So I'm going to be following up with the chief to try to understand how he's going to measure success, because we've not been asked to participate in that program and provide information to that program. It's very laudable, and we would like to be part of it and provide the information and see what we can do, but we've not been asked to participate directly in that vision that the chief did. So there's some opportunities, and Alan had some stuff, so I'll be talking both with the chief and Alan on different things as we move forward with that. Cancer claims we have are not that high, but again, cancer, the state has cancer presumptions, but it's not the full inclusive list that the chief had read to you. It's a smaller number of cancers that are considered presumptive. So there may be people that have cancer out there who have not filed a claim. I would urge that they do, but it may not fall under the presumption, but we would still be looking to take a look at it, see if it is work-related.
I know that, you know, just speaking to that last point that you made, it's especially difficult when a claimant, well, an employee or retiree may not, who has medical coverage, may not know to anticipate that whatever cancer or heart or lung condition they have falls under a presumptive category for workers' comp. Many of them may just go to their medical provider for treatment. And so, you know, it's difficult you don't even know the universe of claims that are really out there, because some of them are being diverted to a medical provider. And so it's just one of those very challenging areas to know.
Okay. And there was one last comment. There was a comment made about mental health claims, PTSD. Alan, is true that the level for proof for a compensable stress claim is extremely high. It's designed in the charter. It's nothing that we can do about it. We can't set rules. You as a board can't do anything about it unless you wanted to recommend a charter change that would have to go through the city council and out to the voters to make that change. It is a very high standard with it, and it is basically, if you are a police officer, you're going to experience stress, and that kind of stress is not compensable. It's the nature of your job, and it is a very high level, because there are people that experience a lot of stress, but hey, you're a police officer, that's the kind of stress you're going to experience. That's the way it's written in the charter.
I believe, I'm going to speak for Alan, but it's like talking about stress and PTSD and coming out of the shadows. That's him talking up here to us too, and the community, that while we all recognize the charter has a high standard, it's something we should think about, that maybe we should think about changing that standard sometime in the future. So until we start talking about it,
well, I mean,
nothing's going to happen. So he's not asking, I don't think he's asking anybody to change anything today, but he wants everybody to be aware that we do have a high standard, that just like in the community and around our country, what we've expected people to do with that type of stress, and now we're asking them to step out of the shadows. Well, they're going to expect some support on the other end. So he's opening up the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's excellent to do. I think you look at all the fire bureaus and police bureaus that have had stress, it's bringing it out in the open is the number one way to deal with it, and the bureaus that have done that have had very good success in dealing with it and having less stress injuries and less stress health issues with it. So I'm excited to see and hear that culture is finally happening, because it wasn't happening a few years ago. So that's great, and see what we can do. Again, the challenge that we have right now is our mission is to pay the benefits. We step outside of that mission, and we had to have to figure out how to do it and how to staff for it and that stuff. So I don't want to say no, but again, it's historically the mission has been this particular one.
When you say the mission is to pay the benefits, I don't know where that's coming from. Our job is for the benefit of the members and their dependents. It's for the benefit.
And the benefits are defined in the charter.
As paying
retirees and all the retiree benefits and all the disability benefits. That's what it is. And
it specifically says for the benefit. I think we can take that and use it in common terms.
And if that's the direction we want to go, we have to be aware of what impact it will have on the Bureau, because we are focused very much.
I'm not saying we're going in any, that's the direction we're in. And so I know we still have to do what the charter says, but that's still.
If you're asking us to get more involved with advocacy, more involved in working with the bureaus to do stuff, that's a staffing issue. That's a staffing issue and some training issues. And if that's the direction that the board wants to set a policy for, we are going to have to come back in and figure out how can we successfully participate in those, because we are geared to pay benefits. We're not geared to having a lot of staff and other stuff being paid outside. So this has been a very narrow interpretation that's been around for the Bureau since its inception. And now if we want to expand and become more of an advocate, more of a champion for the members to go beyond that and participate in some of the efforts that the chief and Alan have talked about and potentially are happening in the police bureau, that would be a policy decision coming from the board. But you have to realize the policy decision means we have to be prepared to be able to do that. And we are not, as a bureau, prepared to do that right now.
Understandable.
And it's not that I am saying, no, I don't want to do it. I agree. It's something that we could help with, but again, that's outside what the traditional view of what our bureau does, and we've not been set up or staffed or been directed to do that. And so if we want to add that in as the board wants to direct us to start doing that, we have to look at, okay, what does that mean to our organization? How can we provide the resources and the help to do that with it? I mean, it's exciting to hear, you talk to the chief, not only here, but you hear he's very excited, very passionate about what he talked about today. You get in the room talking with him, you can't help but get jazzed up and excited with him as he goes that direction. I get frustrated because I'm not seeing other people in the city who have the power to assist him doing that get as excited and jazzed up to him, because it's the same thing. The city's got a limited budget, it's got limited stuff, so there's tough decisions to be made. I can't give him the budget he needs to do it, But could we get in there and help with some of the excitement, help with some of the direction? Yes, but again, the direction, who's really going to provide the necessary resources has got to come from the city council and the city commissioner in charge. I can't fill their gap. I can't do that. I can participate, but I'm going to be honest with you, my political, that's where it's got to come from. You've got to convince the city council to spend this money to put all these resources available, both police and fire, to help their people in their wellness, to improve their jobs, to make sure their jobs are safer, to make sure that they have less injuries. They're the ones that got to stand up. Because there were several other things that the chief wanted, talking about cancer, that did not make a budget. And again, I know he's frustrated with some of that, but he's been working really hard, and I can't step in and fill that, and I can come in and maybe champion, but the audience that has to hear and react starts at the city council level. And I can't I can't fill in for the city council no matter what I do with it. And it's frustrating because, again, you hear the chief talk, you get really energized on what he wants to do. You read all the material that both he and Alan had talked about. Mm-hmm. There are some significant issues out there for firefighters, and I know they're out there for police too. It's got the bureaus, they're going to have to get the city council in there and figure out where they get the budget, where they get the resources to help make those things happen.
This feels to me like a topic that deserves some continued discussion. I don't know if today is it, but I would certainly, I agree with your comments. Clearly, there are charter limitations and limitations on what we as a group have any control over doing. Mm-hmm. But to the extent that we can learn more about it, I'm certainly in favor of doing that. And if there are practical ways that we can support the process in getting something that can be proven to be successful funded, then I'd like to see how we could participate in that. It does seem to me that getting some information that the chief alluded to about other studies from Seattle and other places where they feel like they've had more very different wellness studies and medical screening taking place, where they've been able to document some specific successes and dollar savings, that seems like it would be eminently helpful to you and to us. So that seems like a place to start.
Get those studies and take a look at them.
Great. Very impassioned discussion. Thank you. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of conversation that I look forward to all of us having.
Okay.
Great. Next item.
Budget. Stacey.
Well, because we do have some year-end data, I won't wait for questions, although I'm always happy to answer them. But on the expenditure report, you'll see on the front side, we have year-to-date for this fiscal year, which is just July and August data, and in fact, it's not very exciting, and in fact, it looks weird because of accounting accruals. So not a lot to see there, although I'm happy to answer questions. But if you flip onto the back, you'll see how we ended fiscal year 17-18. We did end within budget in all of our program categories and all of our budget, local budget law categories. The story is actually slightly more interesting on the revenue side, which we don't have a graph for, but we did undercollect on property taxes. I know Chair Cooperman already knows about this. We got about 1.8 million less out of our levy than we had planned to get, and that's because there was more compression than we were expecting from Measure 5 and Measure 50, which compresses general government taxes under that $10 per $1,000 of RMV. And our interagency revenue, less of an impact from this, but from the Police Bureau came in a little under that revenue. The source of that revenue is when police does contract work for outside parties. We get a cut of what they get paid to offset pension and disability costs, and with their staffing shortages, they have just understandably been doing less of that work, and so we've been getting a little less from there. But that is how 17-18 ended. No impact to programs from undercollecting on property taxes. I mean, we have a healthy fund contingency, but we didn't even need to touch that because we also had fewer retirements than we had budgeted for, and disability costs were lower than we were planning as well last year. I'm happy to answer any questions about the financials.
It's always exciting. You said it's probably not exciting. It's always exciting.
I know, this is true. I can always count on Chair Cooperman to be excited by by dollars. You're right, it is exciting. You're right, it is exciting. That's why I do this for a living. It's super exciting.
Any questions? Questions?
Thank you.
No questions, no.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the presentation on the budget. I like the everything else category.
Everything else I'll dump together. If you want to hear about something specific, just let me know.
Thank you. And item 3.
So Fpdr updates here. Do want to let you know that we had a long-term employee, Julia Town, who had been 12 years with Fpdr. She had died unexpectedly about 5 or 6 weeks ago. We don't have a whole lot of details, and that's because the family intended to keep things extremely private, and we decided to honor that privacy, so we don't have a whole lot of details of what happened. This unusual situation have happened in a bureau, so we worked with different ways of getting counseling and support for our staff with it. We were able to, with the help of our fire liaison, Frank Del Carlo, to bring in people that immediately respond to situations, and they just came around the bureau shortly after it was announced and talked with everybody. And then we had EAP come in with a grief counseling session for a while after that. We've had some other stuff. So that was a tough time for the employees because Julia had been a fixture in the bureau for a long time with that. Switch the pace here. So the Jason and Brian's positions on the board are up for election or re-election starting in October. So we'll start the process in October. First will be the formal announcements that the positions will be open, and then we'll get nominations for those positions, and whether Jason likes to come back or if somebody else will do it. Then we go through a series of well explained in the rules for the process, depending upon how many nominations there are and how we do it. We do a vote by mail should we have to do a vote. So we have that process all set up. And the intent is that we'll have the election completed no later than mid-December with results announced. One other thing that we had, so I don't know if you picked up on this in the newspaper or in City Council, we had a gentleman who was the son of a widow. She died a few years ago, and he kept receiving and using her benefits. Unfortunately, the service, I've learned so much more about these services that go out and search for people's death. They didn't pick up on this for 3 years. There's a lot of reasons why, stuff that I have totally, we'll go over that if you want to know. But what we did is we got City Council's permission to institute a lawsuit to collect the $70,000 back from him. We had made multiple attempts to get him on payment plans and everything else, and he just didn't cooperate, sort of strung us along until I got to the point enough's enough, and we said we need to go ahead and take the legal action with it. Just a quick thing here is normally you would think, geez, Social Security Death Index would catch it. Well, the Social Security Death Index after 2011 is not a definitive list of people who have died. State of Oregon considers its vital records to be private and not subject to public release without a special request. So they do not provide information to services like us that ask, can we scan all the deaths in the last year and then tell us, gee, match that list to ours. They won't allow that to happen. They will send their list off to Social Security because they're required to by law, but then they have put a limit on that Social Security cannot release that information in their public release. So therefore, if this person's death was only reported to the state of Oregon, we have no access to that person's death unless we file 2,000 separate requests, one on each of our retirees to find it. So we've worked hard with this, the group that we're using, the company that we're using, and they've got ways to expand it so we can probably use some other methods to help catch these, but it's still not perfect. And we were quite surprised to find the Social Security Death Index was not up to date, and it didn't help that this woman did not collect Social Security or Medicare on top of that, and that her son transferred all the accounts into his name, including the house, before she died, so she was essentially off the grid. But anyway, so we have that story. We did find it finally, and we are taking action in doing that. So I'll just jump over to number 4, which is future meeting agendas. In November, we're going to present some study on opioids, how much we're paying or how much we paid this year from January 1 through September 30, try to give some overview of what's happening and then get some more ideas of additional data that you may want to see in the future of opioid prescriptions that we pay for. We're also in the November meeting doing the annual Fpdr financial audit report. Moss Adams will be here and just give a quick presentation on that. And we'll present the 2019 board schedule for your review and approval at that time. January, we'll have the budget again, review and approve it, and then you'll also have Milliman presenting their actuarial valuation levy adequacy analysis that's done once every 2 years.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then we have one last thing. Franco, did he stay? Okay. Just a quick legal update. This is not a executive session as we initially planned.
Good afternoon, Chair Cooperman, trustees. Just a quick legal update. The certain members of the board, past and present, had been named as defendants along with the PERS board, the mayor, current and former city employees by a plaintiff who is a retired FPDR2 member, Joe Jimkowski. And we had provided some information about this case early on. The state court has dismissed the case, and the time on the motions by the city and by the state, granting all the motions for procedural and substantive problems with the complaint, and the time for making an appeal has passed. So that case is done, and just wanted to give the board the final result of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. We've covered all of our agenda items. I want to thank everyone who has stayed with us through the entire meeting and thank my colleagues on the board. And we will see you in November.
In November.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the date of the November meeting?
What is that?
Is it the 4th Tuesday or the
27th, 4th Tuesday is after Thanksgiving.
That's after. Okay.